Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. The College Football Playoff Committee chose the Miami Hurricanes over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, this has been a big topic over the last handful of weeks in the sport of college football. Andrew, did the committee get it right?
I think if you look at the holistic season of college football in 2025, they made the right decision to put Miami in the playoff over Notre Dame. It's just the lead up to it. I can see why people are angry, right? You have Notre Dame. I can see why Notre Dame would feel that they got the rug pulled out from them, especially over the past couple weeks. They've made some decisions where they've moved Notre Dame down, especially in that last the penultimate college football rankings, where they moved Notre Dame behind Alabama in a game where Alabama struggled in an Auburn team that didn't make a bowl game, and then Notre Dame handily beat a technical rival, not really a team that is really a rival to Notre Dame, but still there was no reason for them to move it down. So they kind of set up this decision where if BYU lost, it was going to be Miami versus Notre Dame, right? And I could see why, after all of the propaganda that's been put out by the ACC and just in general, everybody saying that the committee made the wrong decision, how they could review it, watch the game, and see that Miami was the better team. I think that maybe when you're throwing in the Alabama perspective in here as well, it gets a little bit more complicated. But from the perspective of Miami versus Notre Dame, I think the committee did make the right decision in honoring a head-to-head matchup, which they've for so long, right? There's been a couple criterias that the College Football Playoff Committee has kind of died on. One of them is that college championship games, like between the Power Four conferences and even some of the lower tier conferences, shouldn't impact your ranking as much as a regular season game, because it's a game that you earned. And the other huge one is head to head, right? They almost always honor the head to head. Not almost always, they do always honor the head to head when it is in range of it being something that you can honor. And I think that they made the right decision here as well, even though it was week 0, week 1, whatever it was, the first game of the season back in August 31st. I think that they made the right decision.
Me and you are on the complete same page. I wish we would have been talking about this leading up to it. I know it sounds like, maybe I'm coming from like hindsight is 2020, but I swear I did. I think we both, you were more skeptical, but I did think that the committee was going to eventually make the right decision. But as you did lay out, wrong process, right decision. And that was very scary, in my opinion, for the sanctity of the sport. I know that sounds ridiculously serious, super dramatic for just college football, but I just felt like at a certain point they needed to. There was a conspiracy here, in my opinion, that I thought that they were moving up Miami, even when they were moving up Miami because they should have been higher in general, but they weren't exactly doing anything necessarily to jump the teams that were in front of them. They took care of business. They were on a roll. They got a good win against Pitt, but they jumped teams like Georgia Tech, who didn't even play that one week that they jumped them. They jumped Utah, ended up jumping BYU, who obviously played in their conference championship game, and Miami didn't play. Like, they were jumping multiple teams, Vandy as well, that were winning, or they had an extra game, or they were off. And you could just kind of tell that the committee was trying to put these two teams together because they had made an initial mistake. Maybe not in the first rankings, but definitely in the second to third college football rankings this year. They needed to get those teams closer to make that decision. They definitely pulled the rug under Notre Dame, though, I will say, because you just as a fan, I'm sure, are probably thinking that the committee has made that decision. And they've honestly, they gave you tons of post rankings show interviews where they kind of doubled down on it. But towards the end there, they were leaving the door open. And that penultimate rankings, they did leave the door wide open. And I thought that was pretty much should tell you what it was or what they were going to do.
Yeah, and then from the perspective of a Notre Dame fan, right? Looking at the rankings, and then what more can you do, right? You won every single game after the first two. You won them by an average of 30 points, right? So you can't do anything more to solidify in the committee's mind that you should be a college football playoff team. And especially given the fact that the odds makers are saying you might have the fourth best odds during the whole national championship. In general, there was a lot of things going your way towards the end of the season. Love is a Heisman Trophy candidate. So everything was kind of going the Irish's way. They couldn't have done much more besides beat Texas A&M or Miami to make it to the college football playoff. So in their eyes, if they're doing everything they can, and they were in every single ranking before the last one, the one that actually mattered, I could see why you'd be upset. But at the end of the day, it was the right decision, and it's just unfortunate, right? Because the head-to-head has to matter. Because if it was, I think that as a Notre Dame fan, if you're any more close to reasonable, you can understand that if it was the opposite way around, and Miami was the one who had lost that first game, they had the same record, and Notre Dame somehow, if it was just the exact same scenario, I'm not going to illustrate it completely, but Notre Dame would be lobbying for that exact same thing to happen, and it would be equally as detrimental to the sport if Notre Dame got in over Miami. It's not about the brands, it's not about anything other than the fact that the head-to-head has mattered for such a long time. It's the only tiebreaker that makes sense in a variety of different sports: basketball, football, whatever you want to do. Like, head-to-head is always the first tiebreaker, and I think that the committee made the right decision.
It is, yeah, it is the official first tiebreaker in all four major sports in North America. And obviously, this sport is bigger than the NBA. So why would you not essentially have it? The committee has to make that decision because, it's just the way it's built is way different. I'm glad that you mentioned talking about Notre Dame. They did as much as they could. I think when they were 0-2, it felt like they did control their own destiny in a sense. I'm sure there's some Notre Dame fans that would probably say maybe when you're 0-2, they know 10-2 doesn't guarantee it, but they did as much as they could. I think if you're 0-2, the only scenario where you do control your own destiny is when you're seeing a conference championship possibility down the line, because that gives you an auto bid. Otherwise, there's going to be 10-2 teams outside of Notre Dame as well that we saw that were left out, and an 11-2 BYU team that was left out as well. We were talking about, it was important for the sport. Me and you have both said that the resumes were comparable. That's the big thing here. It's that they both felt like it wasn't like Notre Dame had 6 ranked wins or something like that. And you probably wouldn't even need 6 for this not to matter. But if they had 4 ranked wins, like 4 more than Miami did or something like that, they had a crazy schedule, the years that they've had some really good years where their schedule has just turned out to be really tough. If it was like that, then yeah, we have seen people say we're going to take this other team that's got a much better like strength of record, and we're going to have to ignore the head-to-head because they've shown us more on the field. But that just wasn't the case. So with comparable resumes, you got to go head-to-head. Now, the reason that we were both saying like it was big for the sport, not only just for the college football playoff. I'm just going to throw this out here. I think this is big for Notre Dame because if they had gotten in over Miami, it would have validated what USC did to them. And this process almost did validate kind of what USC is doing, where they're saying, hey, we don't know if we want to play every single year. I mean, Notre Dame's already moved to making Clemson that team that is kind of in USC's position. But if you're a team in a conference and you're in one of those bigger conferences, such as the Big Ten is and USC is, why would you want to schedule Notre Dame in that sense? This, in my opinion, at least shows that maybe like there's still an avenue for Notre Dame to schedule tough, and this would have been a disaster scenario in my opinion if that was the case. I also would have thought we would have seen a lot of non-conference matchups get canceled if Notre Dame had gotten in this scenario. If it's between Notre Dame and Miami in this scenario, I think we would have seen a lot more teams canceled.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there too, especially given the fact that Texas is lobbying to be in, and their whole reasoning is that we scheduled tough, we scheduled an out of conference opponent. It was 1 versus 2 to start the season, and we ended up losing that game. But the committee is just essentially penalizing us for that. If we didn't play that game, we played some FCS school or some lower FBS school, that they would be in the college football playoff. And I don't know that they're wrong about that. I probably think that they're right, but at the same time, like, this at least gives you the reasoning why you do it, because a 10-2 Miami team that has 2 losses that aren't particularly great, but we talked about this off camera. Those losses aren't as bad as people make them out to be. Those are 2 8-win teams. One of them could have been possibly the ACC champion in SMU had they not lost to Cal the last week of the season. So those losses are a little bit overstated, but in general, like, the point is that there's been a huge hit to playing out of conference games through that Texas game, and Miami and Notre Dame would have been another big one that kind of just put a little bit of a damper on teams wanting to schedule hard, especially out of conference to start the season. So it probably maybe saves the first 3 weeks of the season for the next couple years. Maybe I think teams are still going to be a little bit weary of scheduling hard out of conference, but still, I think that Notre Dame fans too aren't even arguing against Miami, because they understand what the majority of people understand as well. The strength of record is what one team difference, or like they're back-to-back in strength of record, back-to-back in strength of schedule. I don't think there's no argument in which you can make that Notre Dame has a significantly better resume. A lot of the teams that they both played, Miami beat them by more. Even if you want to say it was in garbage time or whatever, they still played those teams very similarly, the common opponents that they did have. And there's just no real argument besides the fact that Notre Dame was ranked higher initially. I think that the argument that a lot of Notre Dame fans are really like seeking out is the Bama argument, because they haven't looked good to end the season, right? The Auburn game didn't look pretty. I understand it's in Jordan-Hare, it's a rivalry game, but that didn't look good. Just towards the end of the season, they weren't playing good football offensively, and they got crushed in the SEC championship game. So I think that's more of their avenue. But if it's going to be a 1v1 versus Miami, you couldn't have liked your odds as a Notre Dame fan. You had to at least think it was 60-40.
Yeah, we didn't really talk too much here about Alabama and BYU. It does feel like BYU was kind of set up to fail here, to bring these two teams together. But that Utah win is good, but can it carry you into the playoffs? I think the committee was like, nope, it can't, especially because the other tape that that BYU put on our TV screens was against Texas Tech, against a really tough opponent, and they just didn't really look like they belonged for 8 straight quarters. And then, I thought they were going to move down Alabama because I thought the Georgia loss took away their best win, but I think that's still a sanctity of the sport argument. I'm cool with it too. I think the committee overall made the right decision.
Yeah, I think that the overarching theme of these championship games now is that people, or two things that people are really taking in, is that the talent pool in college football is a lot more widespread than it used to be, right? Even when we made it to 12, there was probably that 11th, 12th team was probably not good enough to compete. And we're probably seeing that again with the auto bits and the JMU and Tulane that we have right now. But if you look at 13, 14, Vanderbilt, Texas, they probably have genuine opportunities where they can make a case. The one takeaway is probably that the playoff will probably get an expansion sometime soon, which is exciting, but also it might leave years where 15, 16, 13, 14 are all teams that you really don't think have a chance. But I mean, if it means more, especially because of the fact that we also talked about this, that the bowls don't matter anymore. Right. So if you're not in the college football playoff spot, your season's essentially over and you don't get to watch your team play another meaningful football game. I think that expanding the playoff helps with that a little bit, just to give people more shots at potentially being able to make a run in the college football playoff. But when 14, 16 is probably at least my limit to which I think that competitive football can be, because even with how widespread the talent pool in college football is, there's only so many teams that can actually compete, I feel like.
Yeah, I think we have a problem here. I don't really want to expand, but I think just the way that the conferences are built, too many teams are in each of them. We might just have to do it at this point. I don't blame G5s at all. I blame the ACC and having 17 teams and it not being able to crown their own champion. It's just a mess. I think that is actually a guarantee that we're not going to have the same playoff format next year. I mean, Notre Dame's already got the MOU that kicks in that they signed last spring that kicks in for next season. So it's going to look different. I think we're going to have more teams. They already pushed the deadline back to decide on that to sometime in mid to late January anyway. So I think that's pretty much a given.